Welcome to the County Conversations Podcast, brought to you by the Florida Association of Counties Institute for County Government with support from the University of Florida's IFAS. In this podcast, we dive deep into the diverse and dynamic world of Florida's counties with engaging interviews and thought-provoking conversations surrounding the challenges as well as successes of Florida's counties. Each episode brings you first-hand perspectives from county commissioners, government officials, community leaders, and subject matter experts who are shaping the future of our state. We explore a wide range of topics from economic development and public safety to environmental conservation and emerging technologies. Our aim here is to provide a platform for knowledge sharing, collaboration, and inspiration for county officials and residents alike. Whether you're a county commissioner, government professional, or simply interested in understanding the local government landscape, we hope this podcast provides valuable insights and practical takeaways on all things counties.
All right, so Mike, Ruben, thank you for coming on the podcast in Studio 67. It's a humble little studio, so appreciate you coming in.
Eric, I appreciate you inviting me. It's quite the facility. I love what you guys have done here. So.
Thank you. All right, so let's start with a little background, a little bio, where you're from, how much time you've been in Tallahassee, and education background, and then how you got into this unusual line of work in ports.
Oh wow, you're gonna make me go all the way back. I'm one of the. Well, I don't know if there's few anymore. I'm a native, born in Orlando, Florida. My father was working out at the Kennedy Space Center, and been in Tallahassee since 1987 when I went to law school here, and then went over to work at the Florida House. Really was there from 92 to 98, maybe a little longer. I can't remember the exact stuff. And got hired out of there by John LeCapra to work for the Florida Ports Council, and I've been doing this stuff. I did economic development. That committee kind of work over in the Capitol. House was an interesting starting ground, but before that time, I had lots of fun. Did a little stint in the Navy just to keep myself, help me grow up.
That?
Oh yeah. I did a little.
That was before law school.
That was before law school. Long time ago. Was actually over in the middle of the Mediterranean when the Beirut incident occurred, and there was that terrorist incident. Mm-hmm. So, been around a bit.
Yeah, I remember LeCapra.
Yeah, John did this stuff for a while, and now he's retired up in North Carolina, and Doug Wheeler did a little stint for us as the president, and been hanging around a while, and they asked me to do a job, and I said, sure. So here I am doing the president and CEO work. We got a great little group over in the Florida Ports Council. I don't know if you want me to talk about them or not, but happy to mention the Florida Ports Council's been around for quite some time, 30 plus years, and a collection of we have local government seaports. They're either elected, city-owned, operated, or county-owned and operated, and those ports work together in a collegial manner, and they meet at least twice a year, sometimes more. We have a couple funding statutory programs that we help run. We have a $25 million Florida Seaport Transportation Economic Development Program that this group. I tell everybody I work for a fantastic group of port directors. I think they're some of the best in the world. Certainly they've done a good job with the growth of their individual seaports and the Florida system. So the Florida Ports Council works together to promote the entire seaport system. Obviously, all of them are trying to get as much cargo and cruise passengers through this port as they can, and they all do a good job at it. But some very good port directors, and they do work together rather well.
So how about what's your elevator speech when you someone asks you why are ports important to Florida, and maybe part two is why should counties care?
Well, part one is for any consumer of goods. Everything you consume, whether it's the fuel in your car you got up in the morning, your furniture and everything else, your bed you're sleeping in, where you're drinking your cup of coffee in the morning, that's come through a seaport. All those goods you buy at the grocery store, just about everything you're getting is coming through a seaport, and we hope that it's coming to a Florida seaport because that means jobs for Floridians. And it's a lot of jobs. We're going to do a new economic impact analysis, but it's about 900,000 jobs, and they're well-paying jobs. Somebody that's operating a container crane, it's a blue-collar job. Those are at least six-figure jobs, and it's difficult work, and I got a lot of training for it, and that's just the higher part of it. But everybody on that port area, whether they're moving cargo or whether they're helping move passengers and their luggage, is an integral part of it. And they're all, I think the average wage, again, it's been a while since we looked at it, but the average wage is over $50,000 a year. So these are decent, well-paying blue-collar jobs. And it's important to the state of Florida. I think if you look at the supply chain crisis, everybody looking for toilet paper just a few years ago, it was important that we bring it through here. So if it's coming to a Florida port and it's being consumed by a Floridian or a tourist, we've reduced the cost of that. Transportation is one of the primary cost and movement of goods and passengers, and to the extent you can move them here in the state of Florida, the less it's going to be. We also supply the Caribbean quite well. If you look at Puerto Rico, again, and I'll hit the hurricanes just a second here, but if you look at Puerto Rico, their goods are primarily coming through Jacksport. So Jacksonville is a very important seaport to Puerto Rico. And anybody that's lived in Florida long enough to go through a hurricane realizes how important fuel is. And our ports provide 95+% of the fuel to Floridians, whether that's for their cars, their generators, or anything else. You want those seaports to be open, and our ports do a very good job on hurricane preparedness and hurricane reactions and getting things as open as quickly as they can. We work well with the Coast Guard, who is a primary federal partner in that, and that's an important issue with it. And I think that's moving to the county issue. That's probably one of the big deals for a county, not including the two big county ports perhaps down in South Florida, Miami and Everglades. Both are controlled, and certainly the governing boards of those are the Miami-Dade County Commission and the Broward County Commission. But they're not the only ones. So, depending on the structure of it. But we're providing all those goods and services. And I'll end with the roads. That's important to everybody. The aggregate to help build those roads, that's coming to our ports as well. And if you purchase that aggregate from a port outside of Florida, you're paying more for it. So one of the things we worked with the transportation builders on a couple sessions ago was to see if we couldn't try to increase the flow of that aggregate into the state of Florida. Now, it's obviously not going to be a revenue generation stuff like, cruise passengers and containers and the like of it. So, if tenants are looking to come to a Florida seaport and operate a facility, they're going to want something that has a bigger return on it. So they're going to look at cargo and cruise. But we continue to work towards trying to find a way to get more aggregate closer to those transportation builders.
Man, that's a heck of an elevator speech. That's a long.
That is a quick elevator speech.
No, but it's good. You covered a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's usually just here's my Seaport mission plan and how important your Seaport is to you, Senator/Representative.
Can we step back a little bit and just, because I got my cheat sheet here and I've read a couple of different numbers. I'd say a couple, like the number of public seaports. Can we just talk about the Florida Seaport system? The cheat sheet I got from DOT is we got 15 public seaports, 10, I can let you look at this too, 10 container ports, but then they're categorized as cargo, cruise, and I think other.
They don't have 16?
They do not have 16. And in some of your documents, it's 16. So,
well, the Florida legislature has determined a number of statutory ports. They added one, I don't know what year that is.
Was it Citrus?
Well, Citrus, we've got 16. Let me see who's listed on here. They don't have Putnam.
Citrus had a guardian angel, didn't they, for funding?
Citrus did have a guardian angel. Senator Latvala from around that area was real. There was some effort to expand that facility down in Citrus, but it hasn't occurred in a while. So we have 16. The one that's not on that list is Putnam, in Putnam County, which is along the river. And they actually, anybody that's been to Putnam, it's quite an industrial area they've got going there. They actually have an old existing bulkhead and dock that needs to be repaired, but it's got a warehouse sitting on it that's got a tenant in it already. There's a number of, I want to say they are mega yacht kind of facilities or vessel building, shipbuilding kind of facilities on the St. Johns River. The problem there is the bridge, and I can't remember the bridge that goes across the St. Johns right there. That's a little low that the DOT and Congress are working to raise. So once that thing raised, you can get a lot more cargo vessels under that. So it's got some capacity. We got 16 designated by the Florida legislature. As you noted, not all of them are moving cargo. It's about 10 of them, correct? And if you look at Port Citrus, there's really nothing occurring there. There was some interest in it a while back, but it's still pretty much undeveloped land at Citrus County. It's on the old cross-Florida barge canal, which you have to go way back when everybody was thinking, yeah, let's do the Panama Canal here in Florida, and that didn't get very far. But the old that straight lane is kind of still there into Citrus County and stops, but you could certainly at some point maybe put some bulk cargo or I think actually the movement of I think rocks and other aggregate are probably being done by, I want to say that's Duke Energy, who has a dock there. So we have 16 statutory ports, but there's quite a few like, Duke Energy, which is bringing in coal and other stuff for its plants. Quite a few other dock areas that you could bring stuff into.
In Putnam County, who owns that one?
Putnam County. That's a county port. Palatka. I would tell you the staff over there has done a fantastic job with it. They have actually gotten some money, two slugs of money from the feds. So they're doing pretty good work with grant applications. One for a bit of a dredge from the port area into the channel, and one actually for a port master plan. And the feds, I know there's been some discussions with them up there about how to get the money quickly. I mean, they got a port master plan, and they want them to do all sorts of permitting and analysis. You got the, I'm going to forget the acronym for it, but you got some. They want them to do a permitting kind of thing that you really only do when you're going to start, actually doing work on bulkheading and that kind of thing. This is supposed to be for a plan. You would think the money would flow quickly, but the feds can't seem to get out of their own way when it comes to releasing dollars from several discretionary grant programs.
Did y'all benefit from the Infrastructure Act?
Yes. I mean,
is that part?
Look, I think if I will hand it to Congress. Unlike airports and frankly the other monies that come to roads, there are no programs for seaports. And frankly, the money that started flowing to seaports wouldn't exist but for Mario Diaz-Balart, who was sitting as a chair of that appropriation. Yeah. Yes, did a fantastic job, and I think he's primarily responsible for getting the feds. We've been up there for years trying to get in and move some money to it, and it just took them forever. Then the supply chain, they've started to put more money out there for seaports, and the Infrastructure Act had some money in it. We've got a few designated programs just for seaports. It's not much. You're talking 300 plus seaports around the country and some very big ones, including our Florida seaports. But so the money's there. We've gotten it. I know that I want to say Jacksport, Canaveral, Miami, Tampa. And that's not including dredging. There's a whole dredging program that we've always had issues with the feds on. You had money coming from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and it was like 50% of it was going somewhere else. So a lot of work there to finally get them. I want to say they're close to 100% of those funds. Every shipper and product that comes in is paying a customs fee for harbor maintenance tax. It's called a harbor maintenance tax, not called a general revenue tax. And the harbor maintenance tax wasn't going to harbor maintenance. So it is now. And that's important because all these vessels that are coming in are larger vessels that need more depth and more capacity to come into it. So,
Mike, can those funds be used for improvements to the berth box, or are they restricted just to the channel?
An excellent question. It is a two-part, and you can use some of those money at times for the actual berth box of it. your brother must have told you quite a bit about that, because you do have the berth box.
No, I've seen you in committee speaking before, so I've heard that term.
Well, it is a two-part to it. Obviously the big part is to get the Army Corps to help with that navigational thing, because if you can't get to the berth box, it's not going to do any good to have more stuff there. So they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And a lot of the there's a construction fund, and then there's a harbor there's a maintenance type fund to it as well. So once you get that depth to where you're at, recently Jacksport went to 47 feet, and they need to make sure that the berth box is a little deeper as well. So they're going to use some of those federal dollars as well as their own dollars, and maybe some other dollars from the county/city there to help with that around there. Because the interesting part is that you get a lot of that's a river, and so you're going to have that flow of whatever that's coming in there. So you may get a little fill back in on that area, and you probably have to do at least, not if not annual, it's probably at least a couple years to make sure you're cleaning that out, so you can continue to bring that vessel alongside that dock and offload the cargo on her. So it's a two-part process. Obviously, the federal dollars are very important to a project for navigational stuff, but they remain important for maintenance as well.
Mike, before we got started, I told you I had the opportunity to tour Port Miami in 2023. I actually toured it 3 times in about 4 months. I won't go into detail why, but what I came away with was that ports are like mini cities. And my head was actually spinning, because on the tour, we stopped in front of an enormous cargo ship, which had an enormous crane unloading containers in no particular sequence, but I know there's a logic to what they were doing. There were trucks loading said containers going somewhere. We saw lines of semi-trucks ready to pick up containers, and other trucks that had containers on them. We saw rail cars with different products. The port had customs officials. They had their own port security. Of course, we saw Customs and Border Protection, Coast Guard. And that was before I was taken to the other side of the port, which was hosting enormous cruise ships with state-of-the-art terminals. And so that, to me, looked like it took a lot of precision and organization. And my question was, who is the conductor of all of that? Who's in charge of making sure all that stuff functions efficiently?
Well, first, I can't thank you enough for going on a port tour. It's interesting. People, you got one of the largest, you just use Miami, one of the largest seaports in the world sitting in there. Obviously there's larger ones, but I mean, it is this compact area that I think if you asked half the people that are hanging around there, there's a cargo port over there. I know there's a basketball stadium over there. So it's interesting. We try to get as many legislators and many other officials onto that port to realize what's going on in there. Now the port director obviously is the entity, is the individual involved with sort of the overall administration of it, but it involves not only that port director and the port director staff, but you've got federal officials that are involved, but obviously CBP, the Customs and Border Protection, is an important part of it. They're going to be the ones that ultimately release those containers. You have ship agents, you have freight and customs brokers that are part of the whole movement of it as well. You've got that terminal operator, depending on where at the port of Miami where it came into. You could have a Seaboard Marine, who is an individual terminal operator. They know they got the vessel coming in. They're going to notify those truckers. There's a lot of independent truckers down in Miami, and they'll all get a notification on it. So it's a dance. It is a quite a big dance, and that's one of the issues that is still an issue nationwide, is a trucking interaction between, okay, that box has come off, when do I come pick it up? And we're getting better about having the apps and scheduling and that kind of stuff, but it's one of those things that I keep waiting for some smart whiz kid with an app on that kind of thing to be helping out for a little bit. But it's all in there. You've got the harbor master who's responsible. Okay, I know I've got, because you're going to have a buoy out couple miles out where the vessels are going to come in. So you may have multiple vessels coming in, and they'll wait outside for their permission to come in. The pilots, then you got a Florida pilot that's probably designated just for Miami. That is designated just for Miami. Will be the one in charge of coming from that buoy to bring them in, and whatever berthing space they're assigned, they'll bring it in and either offload passengers or offload cargo. Then you have crews of longshoremen. They'll have designated crews that are obviously, you got both the cranes that'll reach out, pull it off, put it onto some kind of platform to stack them up for either inspections or for release. So it's a pretty significant dance involving a lot of public and private people on there. A well-efficient running one, and obviously the port director is ultimately responsible for making sure that all those parties are working together, because if something goes wrong when it's not doing it, they're going to look at the port director, well, why haven't you worked it out? So there's a contract with the terminal operator, with a Seaboard Marine. There's a contract with all those longshoremen. Obviously, there's some interaction between the Customs and Border Protection port directors that are there. They have the individual inspectors on it, and it could take, if you have some question on where that product is coming in. I'm going to go way too deep here for a minute, so we can always talk about this later on. But before that cargo is loaded or offloaded or whatever the heck it is, let's say it's coming in from China. Before it's even loaded over there, there has to be a notice given to CBP and everybody else that, okay, here's what's being loaded. Here's this vessel is going to stop at along its way, and here's the crew stuff. So there's always a screening going on even before that stuff's coming in to determine, is this vessel stopping at a potential risky area, and is the material coming on a risk as well. So that comes in there. And then the whole payment thing on there, that is really where the freight forwarders get involved in it, and ultimately, making sure that somebody's getting paid.
It's amazing. I mean, you were talking about having more efficient ports, and obviously you guys are competing with other ports outside of Florida, right?
Correct.
And so you got to demonstrate you have a competitive advantage. But if that dance doesn't take place correctly, why is the port going to? Why is a cargo ship going to go to this port in Florida versus one in Georgia?
That's the California supply chain. I keep hoping for them to continue making crazy regulations and rules over there. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's all about first you got to have the capacity to bring it in. Then you got to have the capability to move that good. Whether it's on dock facilities, cranes, and the rest of it. And then where the heck is it going? Is it being moved into? Our South Florida ports are primarily, if you're down living in South Florida, your goods are coming through a South Florida port. But they also want to move that stuff either to discretionary markets somewhere either in Florida or into Southeast United States or into Caribbean, Latin American somewhere. So there's a little bit of growth in there on that one. So you've got to make sure you demonstrate to a shipping line or a vessel that, okay, if you're bringing your product in, not only are you delivering it to obviously this significant market in Florida that has both, the third largest and as well as a bunch of tourists in there, but you have the ability to move some other product in there. So these vessels are so large, they're moving, usually stopping at more than one spot. They'll either make Florida, one of the early spots coming out of the Panama Canal, or Florida, one of the other spots coming out of, over from Europe and that kind of thing. So it's you got to prove that you have the capability to that. And I think we had the chance. It's been tough because look. This cargo stuff, these people, they get used to it. They don't want to change their shipping lanes. I've been doing this for 20 years. We go to California. Well, you just keep shipping them. Why should I change? And then all of a sudden, their product was moving slower. And then we demonstrated that, well, if you bring it around here, you can actually get it to your ultimate destination faster than waiting, find some berthing space over in California. So I think the entire East Coast of the United States proved that. And the interesting thing was the Gulf of Mexico area, really Texas to us, was one of the primary growth areas because you could bring it in there and obviously get to some other areas in the United States quicker than you could through California. And I think we're still demonstrating that. That's why we want to continue to invest because of the competitive nature. Everybody's looking, all of our neighboring states are looking to be, hey, we'll build it, or we'll rehab, or whatever we're doing here. So we will have the capacity for you to move here. So it's an ongoing competition for being the area to bring those goods in and those jobs. That will continue to have to prove it really has now become an annual. Can you prove it? We've got a number of new vessel calls from big vessels that are coming out of either Europe or from Asia, or even down in Latin America. That we've shown that if you bring your vessel here, you'll have your product into a Florida market and beyond, and we'll have to continue to prove it.
With within the state, within your member ports, is it a healthy, friendly competition? I mean, between Miami-Dade, Port Everglades. I mean, how does that work?
It is. Obviously, look, everybody, I'd like to tell you, you've got 67 counties and
400 cities plus.
406 plus cities. So they all want to be the location for whatever. And same thing with a seaport. Mm-hmm. So everybody's trying to make sure that they're way. And I think our group understands that, look, if it's not, we don't have to come to Florida. I want to come to my port first, but if it's not coming to my port, I want to be able to tell them that, okay, there's another Florida port out there. And in some cases, some of our ports have, there's little capacity issues on there, and whether they want to say, look, I mean, the whole aggregate issue on road building, that may not be, that takes up a lot of space sometimes because you're dumping a lot of aggregate products somewhere. So that space, obviously could be used for lay down a better return on investment of containers than it would be for, some kind of stone or sand. So, maybe there's a port over there that hasn't, a smaller port that could use, that could tell a tenant, you could bring that aggregate here. So it's one of those things where, look, come to Florida. We'll find you an area, and we don't want to tell. You know how it is. You start getting into that competition, and then all of a sudden they offered me this, and then they offered me that. So that's something we've tried to stay away from, because they will definitely, look, businesses do that everywhere. So we try to stay away from that kind of stuff, and we don't want any state funds being used for that kind of issue or stealing tenants from another seaport. And they've gotten pretty good at it. There's a rare occasion these days if that occurs. And usually it's more about, hey, Governor, hey, DOT, can you help tell this business that if you come to Florida, we'll make sure that there's some allocation of funds for the growth of wherever you want to go.
All right. You want to just talk about your legislative priorities? I know we just concluded session, but what were your priorities this year?
Well, it's like I said, we're looking for, it's a competition. And, it's interesting. Texas just put $250 million out this year for harbor maintenance, as well as for some growth on, not only for Port of Houston, but that's that whole harbor area there for several ports. I think they got more than we do. So they put some money out. It's always a competition with our good friends up north and Georgia. They spend a lot of their money on ports there. They got two ports on the side there because there's a very short, obviously, distance between, for putting anything in there. You got Savannah and Brunswick, and then you got a couple of little ones in Bainbridge and some inland port areas. But they spent a lot of money.
Is Savannah the big boy?
Savannah's the big boy. They're trying to build more container. It's just cheaper land. They can give away land there. Not too easy to do that in Florida. Everybody wants to live by the water in Florida, so any available waterside land is, got to compete with condos and the like here in Florida. Not so much in Georgia, especially when you're going for inland port areas. So we compete with that cheap land up there. So obviously we continue to press DOT and the governor's office and the legislature. Look, let's see if we can allocate some more money to it. This year was a little tight for the budget from, I think the legislature decided to keep more reserves back there. At the same time, they're still investing in. We got a little bit. We didn't get our usual annual amount, but we're still over $100 I think this year we got about 110. Last year it was close to 150, but so hopefully next year we'll be back up again. It's certainly something we're working with leadership on. Give us money, we'll spend it.
Is that direct appropriations, or we're not talking about the FSTED?
No, that's the FSTED and other stuff. I mean, that's where the legislatures and the governor's office have already designated this amount of money.
Okay.
So we always hope for a little bit more, which is why we try to work with DOT on coming up with a project list, and we'll continue to do that.
I want to talk about resiliency real quick. I know that's... I know your tagline is ready, resilient, and I forgot the last one. But...
That's our old one. Now we moved on to seize the opportunity using SEAS. But resiliency's been a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the buzzword now.
It always is.
But I think people fail to realize the amount of resources and the value of that inventory that is sitting right on the front line of a storm coming in. So what are ports doing to make sure that those things aren't just ripped apart?
Well, let's look at fuel for the first answer on the question. And a recent issue down in Port Everglades, when there wasn't a hurricane, it was just a storm that dumped, I don't know how many inches of water, historic inches of water. And those fuel terminal areas, those big tanks out there, have pumps that are required to move that fuel in. And the water got so high that it was over the pumps, so that it stopped working. So now, we're looking at, that's a resiliency effort. You got to move the height of those pumps up so that they're not below water. So, because you can't use, it'll shut down and you might damage that pump. So you'd have to repair the pump. So it's been something we've looked at. I remember some of the, was it 2000, when it felt like every hurricane was just crisscrossing Florida for quite a bit. And, it might have been the earlier one when Governor Bush was there. Everglades was not a priority on getting electricity back to those fuel terminals. So we had called the governor's office and everybody else and say, look, we got fuel terminals that are dependent upon electricity to get the fuel moving, and we can't move this fuel unless they get the electric. This is before we had all the generators that now everybody's required to have on there. So we've been, our guys have been, it's the good thing is, and the bad thing is that we've gotten pretty good at this. Not our first rodeo, as they say. So we've invested a lot of money, and these local governments have invested a lot of money in hardening those fuel terminals at those ports. And we've had more. It used to be just Tampa and Everglades were our primary fuel areas. Well, now Manatee's got fuel, Canaveral's got fuel. There's some small independent-owned fuel stuff up in Jacksonville. So you've got more of a capacity depending on where it goes. As long as that hurricane doesn't come up the middle of Florida and shut everybody down, we might have one port that's still open that can provide fuel over there. So fuel is probably the most looked at area for resiliency, and a lot of hardening that has gone on with respect to whether it's electrical hookups for those terminals or just making sure that those pumps are protected to do it. So, and there's a lot of those port operators and those employees will stay on after that port closes, because it's still, when it goes Zulu and that port's not open for anything anymore, they're still offloading fuel if there's fuel available to be offloaded at a lot of it. So a lot of hard work.
I know what Zulu means because I've toured the Miami port 3 times, but can you explain what Zulu means?
You get X-ray, Yankee, Whiskey, and Zulu. Really starting with X-ray is that the storm's getting ready to come, so get prepared. Yankee is, obviously going in, and then there's certain steps. You're no longer allowed to bring that vessel in, and that vessels have to go out or they have to be tied down. Most of them will leave. And Zulu means both land side and water side are closed. So there's not supposed to be anything running anywhere, but obviously the Coast Guard will let those fuel trucks operate as long as it's safe. I think they can. I can't remember the knot of winds. Maybe it might be 40 plus that you really don't want to be driving a fuel truck around in. But so they'll stay open for a bit of that. So it is something that our ports practice every year, get ready. Right before hurricane season comes up, you'll have meetings of the heavy weather groups and get ready for it. So that's always been the primary resiliency effort at seaports. But let's be serious, our seaports are on the water. You want to make sure you can withstand it. Obviously, we've had damage on a seaport, whether it's a warehouse that contains whatever. You got to look at those containers. Sometimes you have containers stacked 3 high. You may not want it stacked 3 high if it's a heavy wind coming in, so you'll put those down. But a lot of effort goes into making sure that those bulkheads and other areas are ready for whatever the heck it is. I remember I think it was Ivan that came through and hit Pensacola. Your brother would know this a bit better than I would, and it tore up the front of the bulkhead, so you had problems bringing in vessels in. So again, that's another area you're looking at: are your bulkheads secure enough, and can they withstand a storm coming through? Now, sometimes they're just too damn big. Panama City built a new warehouse that I think supposed to withstand 150 plus mile-an-hour winds. It didn't stronger. Help. It was stronger when Michael came through, and this brand new warehousing facility got a little bent, so they had to rehab it. If you talk to the old port director, it's like, I got a call from, it'll be fine. It was not, but they reopened it now, and they're doing quite well with it. But all that stuff is there. Again, we're on the water and on the coast, and you got to do what you can do to not only ensure that your facilities can withstand whatever on there, but hopefully strong enough to deal with a blow from a hurricane. They're getting crazier. It's a big deal.
Mike, why don't we end where we started, and that's why ports are important to Florida and to Florida counties. And there's a nice report that the Ports Council put out in 2022. You probably updated it, but I think these numbers speak for themselves. I'm going to summarize a little bit here. Florida's 16 ports, not 15, through cargo and cruise activities, supported 900,000 jobs with an economic contribution of $117 billion statewide. That same year, the ports accommodated 19.4 million cruise passengers. And by the way, my family and I helped boost that number, I'm proud to say. And at the local level, and I'll use Port Miami as one example since I was there in 2023. It said that the port contributed almost $49 billion to the local economy. That's an impressive number to be sure.
Yeah, like I said, I work for some of the best port directors in the world, and they've done a great job. I just, if you look at them, JAXPort, it's astounding. I think they're not top 10. They're probably pretty close to being one of the new, top 10 container ports now in the United States. So a lot of growth there. And let's look at cruise. They got another cruise ship there coming into JAXPort, but anybody that remembers the whole COVID stuff and somehow looking at cruise vessels like they're some kind of petri dish or something along those lines. Certainly, I think the people that are out taking cruises now have shown that, it's a very cost-efficient way to go have travel, and they're fun. They're good to go on. And then I think we're this year, I think we'll exceed the record of cruise passengers. It's just astounding the number of vessels that are out there. And if you look at, just start from JAXPort, now going to be 2, and you go down to Canaveral and Port Miami competing with each other on who has the most cruise passengers. Tossing Everglades and Tampa, and Key West is a destination. So it's a lot of tourism that comes from that aspect, and it's not just United States citizens taking a cruise. You got a lot of foreign nationals that want to get on or come into the United States as well. So cruise numbers are just exploding. And I'm hopeful to see the cargo numbers continue. We had some obviously significant growth right after COVID and the supply chain crisis. It's leveled out a little bit, but it's still over what we had in the past. And I think we'll continue to prove our worth and our capacity and continue to seize those opportunities and grow in the state of Florida.
Mike, this has been great. Thank you for coming in today and spending some time with us.